Developer Tango Gameworks is best known for horror games, and that might skew perceptions of its upcoming title, Ghostwire Tokyo. After all, both its previous games, The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2, fall squarely into the survival horror genre, with the first directed by studio founder Shinji Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil. But while Ghostwire Tokyo was described as spooky by former creative director Ikumi Nakamura on stage during E3 2019 when it was first announced, Ghostwire Tokyo doesn't seem like a game that's likely to scare you. Instead, it seems like an indication that Tango Gameworks is venturing into different areas than what players might expect. A more accurate description for Ghostwire Tokyo might be a first-person shooter with ghosts. Compared to Tango's previous games, it's far more action-oriented. While elements of the supernatural are woven all through its deserted version of Tokyo, the tone isn't one that'll engender fear. In fact, the moment-to-moment action of Ghostwire Tokyo looks like it'll make you feel pretty capable of taking on vicious, strange, and unnerving spectral foes, despite their sometimes frightening appearances. GameSpot recently got to watch about 45 minutes of Ghostwire Tokyo in action in a hands-off preview provided by Tango Gameworks. The portion of the game we saw was pretty close to the beginning, giving some tutorial-esque looks at how you'll explore the game's open-world Tokyo, how you'll interact with certain features to increase your elemental powers, and what exactly is going on in its strange story. You play as Akito, a Japanese man trapped in the Shibuya section of Tokyo during what is apparently an attack by a group of masked cultists. The event sees a fog rip through the area. Anyone caught in it vanishes, their bodies disappearing. Akito survives this fate thanks to a spirit named KK, a man who was hunting the cultists before he was apparently killed. Somehow, KK and Akito fuse together, and this fusion protects Akito from the cultists' attacks, as well as allows him to access a supernatural power called ethereal weaving. That power then allows Akito to draw on elemental energy, firing blasts of power at phantoms and demons to destroy them. The portion of the game we saw was soon after the fog had swept through Shibuya, with KK guiding Akito through the city to find out what happened and discover a way to stop the cult leader, Hanaya. Before he died, KK and his colleagues had been hunting for and attempting to stop the cultists. For Akito, the situation is personal as he's trying to reach his sister, who has seemingly been threatened by Hanaya and the cult. From what we could glean of the story, the demo we watched picked up soon after Akito and KK first encountered one another, with Akito getting the hang of ethereal weaving for the first time while making his way through the suddenly vacant city. While Tokyo is devoid of life, it is full of strangers, or various kinds of ghosts and phantoms. As in most open-world games, it looks as though you'll be able to either fight your way through the specters or attempt to avoid them as you travel through Tokyo. Fighting them brings on the first-person shooter feel of the game, in which Akito uses KK's power to fling bursts of elemental energy at enemies. Those blasts of energy damage the strangers until Akito is able to reveal a core within them, which he can then apparently lasso with his spectral powers and yank out of the ghosts, dispelling them. You'll keep your distance against enemies most of the time, but the creatures we saw in the short demo consistently worked to close the gap on Akito to get close enough to slash him with melee attacks. Ethereal weaving helps in this regard too, allowing you to call up an energy shield to parry the blow and bounce the stranger back as it attacks. Parrying is all about timing, and it appears that much of combat will be about crowd control, knocking enemies back with your attacks and your shield to keep them busy until you can damage them enough to get at their cores. The good news is, if you can expose the cores of more than one enemy at a time, you can rip them all free with the same lasso. Ghostwire Tokyo is an open-world game, which means it's fairly open-ended even as KK guides you through the main quest. Though Akito survived the supernatural fog, it lingers throughout the city at the start of the game. So part of what you'll need to do as you move around is find torii gates that have been infested by the cult's power and use ethereal weaving to clear them of enemies and then cleanse them. That pushes back the fog in a given area, exposing new opportunities to explore. As you make your way around, you'll find spirits who linger throughout the city. Some of them are being caged by strangers, requiring you to fight the ghosts to free the people within them. You can then use human-shaped paper dolls, called katashiro, to absorb the freed souls to help them get out of Shibuya. It looks like you'll absorb souls into katashiro before taking them to phone booths that hide secret technology, apparently set up by KK and his ghost hunter buddies. The phone booths allow you to transfer the spirits out of the fog area, where KK says they should return to normal. From what we can tell, there are quite a few spirits to save in Tokyo, but you'll likely unlock rewards for doing so. Other lingering spirits in Tokyo serve as points of contact for side quests. The main thrust of the demo, however, saw KK guiding Akito back to the spirit's former apartment. There, Akito was able to gather some information about the cult, while also laying claim to a bow and arrow that Akito was able to infuse with his power. But, as is demonstrated earlier in the demo, Hanaya is onto Akito and KK, and is deploying cultists to stop them. As you explore KK's apartment, the entire place is suddenly sealed by a spectral barrier, trapping you inside while the cult tries to use its power to collapse the building around you. That forces Akito to climb higher, making his way through the building and other apartments to destroy magical barrier stones that power the force field. It's in this portion of the demo that Ghostwire Tokyo feels like it's drawing from some of the same DNA as Tango Gameworks' The Evil Within games. In fact, Ghostwire started its life as The Evil Within 3 before it shifted to become something separate. Busting through apartment doors, Akito finds himself entering shifting, impossible spaces. As he enters the living room of one apartment, it reverses, placing him on the ceiling with the furniture above his head. Opening a closet, he finds the barrier stone across a distant gap, with only a narrow window revealing it. A precisely fired arrow destroys the barrier stone, and suddenly the closet reverts to its natural state, with the spirit world beyond vanishing. As Akito makes his way higher, he soon finds himself in twisted apartments with furniture floating in the air, where he has to climb up piece by piece to reach a higher room and the final barrier stone. With the barrier dispelled, Akito and KK start hunting for the cultist who cast the spell, making their way back down to the Tokyo streets. Investigation also seems like it will be a major part of how you interact with Ghostwire Tokyo, with Akito using a spectral vision power that highlights the path the man took as he left the building after trying to get you killed. The demo ends soon after, but the impression it leaves is that you'll be searching the city for multiple cultists, stopping them and whittling down their numbers before ultimately going after Hanaya himself. While we got only a small snippet of Ghostwire Tokyo, what we saw looks like a fascinating mix of what Tango Gameworks has become known for and something wholly new. While this isn't a horror game, and it's not a third-person shooter, Ghostwire does draw on some of the excellently strange locales of The Evil Within and the open-world sensibilities of The Evil Within 2. The combination of real-world locales and supernatural threats looks like it'll work exceedingly well, borrowing shooter elements players are familiar with and twisting them to create something fresh and strange. There is a lot about Ghostwire Tokyo we don't yet know, but our brief look suggests exploring a ghost-filled Tokyo is going to be a blast.